Hola gente, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here today, I am XO Joe and I'm so excited that you clicked on today's video. For those returning, I am so excited to finally launch this new segment I'm calling Books and Blush. I will basically do my monthly wrap up, give you the ratings, the rundown, my thoughts on it, all while getting ready. I freaking love putting on a YouTube video or something as I'm getting ready, so I figured why not make one of my own. I don't do any crazy makeup or anything like that, but I think it's so soothing. Let's get started. So per usual, we have our drink of the day, and since we are getting ready, I'm actually just gonna have water. I always like having water while I'm doing my makeup to hydrate because I'm extra like that. Don't come at me, I already moisturized and added my sunscreen and all my primers beforehand, so don't think I'm just slashing on foundation right from the get-go without actually taking care of my skin. Just thought I would let you know. I look like I'm 4 and like the perfect egghead. So this month was a little bit slower than I would have expected because holidays were freaking insane and it was so hard to say goodbye to my family, and I got a little bit sad after, so I just didn't feel like reading. Fortunately, I did pick it back up and the stack is right behind me. Unfortunately, it was kind of a meh month. Before the end of the year, I had some really great months with just amazing books that I love, and this month the books were just not hitting, okay? Fortunately, there were some books that I really enjoyed and I can't wait to talk about them. Starting with my 5-star read is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I don't even know, I feel like I'm gonna start with this one because it made me cry, and so maybe talking about it again is gonna make me cry even more. So Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I would say, is definitely like the perfect love letter to video games. I've never read a story that uses video games to really explore its themes. It's a completely different coming of age story, which no one warned me about, but plenty of people warned me that, you know, you're gonna be depressed. So what else is new, I guess? So this book stars Sadie and Sam, who were friends since childhood and then broke off when they went off to college. Sam runs into Sadie again and sort of remembers how much he enjoyed gaming with her when they were young and when he was hospitalized, and there's a whole story there. And so them reconnecting and rekindling starts when they meet up again, and then he's having this flood of nostalgia and remembering just how close they used to be. Sadie, on the other hand, doesn't really think about these things because she's in this awkward place in her 20s, aren't we all, where she has this boyfriend she loves and it's the first time she's ever really loved someone, and she's growing up, but she doesn't realize this boyfriend is pretty abusive and this relationship is so inappropriate. And of course, she knows something is off with it because she won't tell anyone, including Sam. When Sam asks where she's coming from and where she's going, we get into that whole thing throughout the story. So when I first started reading this, Sam really came off like an ass. I just didn't think he was a very nice person, and I really didn't think he was likable. I think he was very judgy. I don't know, I just didn't vibe with him at all. I really like Sadie, and I felt for her because she was in this relationship with her professor, who's also really big in her chosen career, which is gaming and game developing. She really put herself in this situation where she can't really afford to be on bad terms with Dope, I forgot his name already. He's a jackass. It's like not worth it. He's clearly abusing his place of authority because he's a professor. Like, he shouldn't be dating his students. So they reconnect and you kind of go back and forth in timeline to see what the story is behind Sam and Sadie, just so you know a little bit more and more. But you get the full picture really like when you finish part 1. You really see how they became friends and also how they lost their friendship. Sam comes from a poor background and Sadie comes from a very wealthy one. While they go to different universities, they still go to prestigious universities, and Sam is actually roommates with a guy named Marks, who is also pretty well off. At the end of them seeing each other again, Sadie gives Sam this really big line like, "Hey Sam, do you still game?" and hands him a game that she developed for her current boyfriend's class that actually did really well, called Solutions. And so he brings it back to Mark's later on. They play it and they just think it's so mind-blowing, and Sam has this sudden urge to make a game with Sadie. And really, when I say this book is a love letter to video games, this is kind of why, because in truth Sam wants to rekindle his friendship with Sadie and Mrs. Sadie, but he ends up doing this through a game, and that theme continues throughout the book where they basically reveal how they feel and they cope with their trauma and with their healing process, or also say things they can't say verbally through the games they develop. And so this is kind of the beginning of that, where Sam really wants to make a game with Sadie. And so when he meets Sadie, like, she's super depressed because Dov is a married man and a professor and breaks up with her, and he was actually very abusive to her, but she doesn't realize that. She's just so depressed, and Sam is not entirely sure why, because he's kind of oblivious to those things. But eventually Sadie relents and they're like, okay, let's make a game. And so this is where the main story of the book launches off from, because they make a really successful game called Ichigo. Now, as a gamer myself, I really loved hearing all of the nerdy things they were saying, like how they're developing the storyline, how they're developing the game, what they're gonna name these characters, what are they gonna be like, what's the background, like just all of those things I really liked hearing. But really, I was so pulled in by their dynamics, because again, we go back and forth, so we know everyone's background a little bit more, because Marx is also involved as a producer. You see the three develop this friendship. They're in their early 20s, they're developing something crazy, they're so ambitious, but they also don't know what they're doing. It's a very early 20s feeling, and I'm 25 and I'm going on to 26, so I feel like I just got out of that, and the book takes you all the way to their late 30s. So it's really interesting being in the age I'm at and reading this book and kind of seeing their journey, because I can definitely relate to that bond and the ambition and the hunger, and like you're not even tired and you have all this energy, but you're also wondering what you're gonna do with your life. Like, there's just a lot of themes that the author geniusly explores without being so outright about them. Instead, she just manipulates your emotional furniture and rearranges it inside your heart and brain, and it isn't until you look up from the book that you realize emotional damage. Along the way in their success, there's a lot that happens, and for me personally, it made me dislike Sam even more. I mean, there's so many people that really freaking love Sam, and I just couldn't understand why. I was like, I don't know, he's such a jerk. I don't get it, but okay, why not? I guess he's lovable, because really Sam had no problem speaking up for himself and saying like, hey, if we're gonna sell the game, I want to sell it to someone who's gonna make us a lot of money. Whereas Sadie wanted to really sell to someone that would let them be creative and somewhere where she felt valued, instead of everyone just giving Sam credit. But Sadie wasn't in a stage in her life where she was able to speak up for herself quite yet. So instead of saying why she really wanted to go with different company, she ended up going along with Sam because she loves Sam, and she understands that she came from a privileged place, but he didn't. He also has a disability, which puts him in the hospital quite often, and that's very costly. And so she accepts and says, okay. And while I agree, like, I understand Sam has all of these needs and wants financial stability and security, I just didn't like the way he went about it and really forced this idea. At least that's how I saw it, and I'm just so protective over people's voices as well. So I just found it so unfair, and I was actually getting so mad in the book. Like, Sadie, I really I want to empower you to speak up, and I'm also so pissed at Sam because it's very clear he can see why you don't want to sign with him and what's going on, but he won't say it and he won't acknowledge it, and so he just wants to do what he wants to do. Marx, Sam, and Sadie are launched into fame because Ichigo does so well, but all the credit goes to Sam. He is the face during press, and the character kind of looks like him, or at least that's what people think. The book also touches on racism back in the day and how a lot of times the media and people just think all Asians look alike because Sam is Korean, but the character is Japanese, so they're like, whoa, you guys look alike. Sadie is really stuck back in the office developing Ichigo 2 because it was part of their contract, something she never wanted to do because it's a ton of work. Sam is still getting all the credit for this game and for the franchise as a whole. There are a lot of unsaid feelings throughout the book because, like I said, it's a coming of age each story. So a lot of them don't know how to actually communicate with each other. I think we can all relate to that. Times where we felt like things were unfair, but we just want to keep the peace. Or maybe we can say what we feel, but we see others don't. But we're kind of like, well, that's their business. Like if they want to say something, they can, but they just don't feel empowered to. And so it's this whole thing where Sam and Sadie feel more like family. It's almost like they don't really see how they're hurting each other, but they're also doing things out of love for each other. The book really goes into detail as they get older and they go through these different phases in their professions. They feel their age when they are the oldest people in the room, even though they're only in their late 20s or early 30s. They see that the gaming industry is changing so much, and they see all the young people around them. They're not in that same mindset anymore. They're more business people than creatives. Now, a few times Marks did have this interest in Sadie, but nothing really came of it when they met. Now, I can't really say a lot more. It is filled with a ton of events that happen because, like I said, you start with them when they're in their early 20s, but you end with them when they're in their late 30s. And there's just so much tragedy that happens in that time frame. Because if you really think about it, as you get older and maybe you lose touch with friends, or life happens, you grow your own family, or you're on your own, you're career driven, or maybe something strikes your family so hard or you so hard that you're not in that place where you're even building anything, you're just trying to build yourself up. This book really touches on all of that because they all go through so much struggle. Within their group of three, there's a shift in dynamic. There are business partners, but they were also friends and loved each other like family, and so that makes things very tricky to navigate. Sadie starts waking up and realizing how she has felt this whole time, and there are things that she noticed Sam did or she thinks he did to her, and so this drives like a wedge between them. So much loss that happens later on in the book that really strikes the reader, but it also strikes the characters in a very fatal way. I think the number one reason I absolutely love this book is because it shows you how much you can lose or change or surrender as you get older. For example, where did their ambition and dreams go? Why couldn't they just talk things out with each other? And they lost so many years together because Sam and Sadie had this falling out later on. There's so much grief there, there's so much trauma that neither of them work through on their own, and so that does impact them later in life and with people around them. And I think that's why it touched me in that way, where it made me reflect and think about, am I forgiving enough, loving enough, communicating enough? Am I protecting myself and those around me? Am I standing up and voicing and calling out these things? Or will I end up in their age at the end of the book, in like their late 30s, looking back and realizing all the things that were left unsaid that could have been said, and all that hurt that didn't have to happen? It's a beautiful book. It had me crying. The reason for the actual title comes out later at the end of the book, and I was just sobbing even more when I realized why it was called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I just really felt this book. It will be in my heart, on my mind for a very long time, and I think it's definitely a great coming of age story for you to read, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s, because it really makes you reflect on your own life and your own journey. Made me cry and emotionally damaged me. We give it 5 stars. At 4 stars, we have The Night Circus. The Night Circus has been on my TBR for a super long time, and it's basically about this circus that pops up without notice that is secretly a challenge between 2 people. While this circus is happening, there's a secret challenge going on, so you would think it might be super action-packed or this mystery you have to resolve, but I have to say this book is just purely aesthetics. There really isn't any plot that's happening that's very obvious in front of you, because the way these 2 players play is so subtle to everyone else that I think it's also subtle to us. Like, we don't even know what's happening. They also don't know a lot about their challenge because their teachers won't tell them anything really about their challenge, and so we're left clueless too. So I have to warn you, while it was a very enjoyable book and it made me feel, and I really admire all the red threads that the author wove into the book, it is very, very slow, okay? It is a slow book because, like I said, it's really just all aesthetics. There's no action pack, there's there's nothing like that. You really spend pages and pages and chapters walking around the circus and seeing the circus and what is magic and who are these people, and the timeline jumps around. A few people I talked to on Bookstagram said that they were actually so confused by this book, and I did ask them, did you really pay attention to the little tiny date that the author wrote at the beginning of each chapter? Because if you didn't, you can get easily lost like in this maze of a circus. So you'll read one chapter and it'll be like 1987, and then the next chapter it'll be 1902. So clearly the events are so far apart and completely different, but still connect, and you don't see that connection until the very freaking end. The main two characters are Celia and Marco. These are the two students that are pitted against each other in this competition, and again, they don't really know the rules or how someone decides a winner. It just goes on for years, and the venue or the stage of this challenge is this circus. And so this circus is a traveling circus, but you would think things aren't real, but Celia and Marco can actually perform magic. And so for us, we think it's just, wow, what an amazing illusionist and what an amazing magician. But the truth is, it's real life. They're just finding clever ways to outbeat each other and really show off what they have and what they can do. I really felt closer and closer to a lot of the characters inside of this circus, because you have different performers there, even though the main people are Marco and Celia. Despite everyone else being kept in the dark, as a reader, you know that it's their circus, it's their challenge, it's what they're doing. All in all, I have to say I enjoyed it because it really was a beautiful story. I think it's very difficult to weave all of those storylines together, and the author really did it in a very unique way to her and the way she writes. At the same time, I wasn't actively reading all the time because I wanted to know. There would be these pockets where I'm like, okay, I gotta know, and I would be met with a chapter that was just like, oh, okay, more vibes, more aesthetic, and I would get a little bit fatigued, a little bit like, okay, this is taking a lot of work for a little reward right now, let me just take a break. And so it really did take me all month to finish this thing because it was just really hard to kind of keep engaged. It was also one of my recommended books for my 12 Recs challenge, and so now it's out of the way, and like I said, 4 stars. Even though I do recommend it and I think it's a really cool read, I will have to say you have to walk in with the correct mentality of this book. It is not crazy tournament, it is not super action-packed, it's not even a love story, honestly, because there is love in there, but I would argue that it's not even a love story because that's not what it's really focused on. It's all vibes, it's all aesthetic, it's magically woven and very confusing, and you do have to invest in it, but I think it's really, really cool. Like, it's a really cool way to storytell once you get to that very ending and piece it all together. At number 3, we're gonna go into Belladonna. Belladonna was actually a book I didn't expect to freaking like so much, but it actually ended up ranking pretty high for me. So Belladonna starts Signa right when she's a little kid. She has an encounter with death. Death literally murders or takes everyone else around her at this ball because she comes from a pretty wealthy family. Everyone dies except her. And so this chapter starts with Death taking a look at Signa and wondering why Signa can see him and why she didn't die as well. Because everyone was poisoned with belladonna berries. She cannot inherit all of her money until she's 20, and all her immediate family, like her mom and her grandma, are dead, who loved her very much when she was small. Everywhere she goes, because she's jumping from aunt to aunt, people keep dying. Like, death keeps showing up. She gets so frustrated. She hates death because she cannot put down roots, and all she wants is to get married and have a happy family and have her inheritance and just live her life. And she just has this fantasy in her mind of going to teas and talking with her friends, and that can never happen because she can't lay down roots because everyone freaking keeps dying. There are rumors that are starting to circulate that she's actually this witch and that she's cursed and that she just keeps killing everybody that takes her in. In her last endeavor, which is this aunt that's like pretty mean, she is actually taken into a pretty wealthy estate, really big one, and when she gets there, she finds out that she's related to the mother of that household, who unfortunately passed away. The father is a little unhinged by her death. She left behind 2 children. One of them has the same symptoms that the mom did when she died, and so she's just really hoping her cousin gets better before she inherits her money, which she's so close to getting, and she wants to debut and all of these things. She just doesn't want Death to show up again, and this is like the perfect family and the perfect place to finally debut and get everything she ever wanted. But for the first time ever, Death actually starts interacting with her. And Death and the mother spirit starts to reveal to her that she was actually poisoned by someone in the manor. And so now Signa has to figure out who or her cousin is gonna die. And not to be selfish, but it will throw in a wrench into her plans to like continue and live a better life and stuff, which is, I shouldn't be laughing, but it's kind of funny because I mean, we can't blame Signa. Like, she's 19 now and she's just been plagued by death. And so she's like, not another one, better find this freaking murderer before, you know, you ruin my tea plans. And so she's off trying to figure out who's actually killing, what's happening, and also hopefully she doesn't look crazy because she's talking to spirits. Now, fortunately for her, people are actually seeing these same spirits too. Like, they say they're haunted, they can kind of feel the mom's presence around, but still it's not like she's gonna go out and just be like, yeah, I see them all the time and Death follows me around and we chat and I'm kind of think he's a little bit hot. She's not gonna be saying all that. She's already an outlier. All these things she didn't learn growing up, like how to be a proper lady. And so she can't just be off the rails crazy and tell everyone that, yeah, she spoke with the mom and she was actually poisoned. So she does have to be sneaky, and that's basically the storyline. I didn't expect it to be a little seductive. There's chemistry between Death and Signa. And so at first I was like, ooh, like this is kind of interesting. I feel like I'm always rooting for the villain. And so in this case, Death, I was like, he sounds great. Like, he sounds amazing. They just have this really nice chemistry. So at first I was like, wow, this is cool. And then for a second I was like, wait, didn't he first meet her as a baby? Is this weird? Is this a little groomish because he's been following her this whole time? Or is it okay because he's like this supernatural entity, no age and just timeless? And he confirmed that he's never been human, so it's not like he was a certain age and then died. He's just been there. Does that make it okay? Or is my Twilight self just making excuses? Because there's a whole line that he says in there, I have waited centuries for you, Signa Faro. And in my head I was like, isn't that what Edward said to Bella toward the end, where she was like, do you have cold feet, you know, when they're gonna get married and stuff? And Edward's like, I've been waiting centuries for you, Bella Swan. This author is just pulling on my nostalgic 15-year-old para-romance self, because I ship it so hard. I was shipping them so hard. And if you add me on Goodreads, you can see all the little highlights I have where I was just screaming that I shipped them. So I will give that little warning that that's probably weird. This is a fandom where we ship fae, vampires, ghosts, I don't even know anymore. And I honestly really enjoyed it. I think it was a very seductive story, and I've never really used those words before, like seductive, but Death was totally seductive in this book. There's a little bit of mystery in there, and I kept guessing like who it was, and I did guess some elements to it. Even the ending, I was like, okay, I didn't expect this to sound like there's a sequel, and it looks like there will be a sequel to the story. I will say that it was a little cheesy in some of the dialogue when Signa's like, I am now free, when she's really accepting the fact that she can harness and use some of Death's gifts and Death's powers as well. This is a little corny. I don't know where this is coming from, but if you say so, Signa. So this is why I'm actually gonna give it 3.75 stars instead of the full 4. Belladonna was like easy to read, really short. I thought it was a standalone book, so it made me want to just like read it even more. It was still just a little cheesy, and it was a little weird the way Death posed this identity question to her. Next one I read was actually Our Demise, which is the sequel to All of Us Villains. If you have not read All of Us Villains, do not watch this next part of the video because I'm going to be talking about the sequel, and so you'll be spoiled. All of Us Villains ends with a bang because Alistair basically murdered his entire family at the end, and despite all of that, just like Death, I am team Alistair and I freaking love him, and I think most of the fandom from this duology loves Alistair. We end up seeing that Reed, the curse maker, is actually the one who wrote the tell-all book, and he wants to harness all of that power for himself, and that's why he wants to break the curse. But he is also aware that they all might just die and this won't be broken, and so Isabel is like held hostage and also betrayed Alistair, sister. Brienne has this huge fight with her sister, and just everything is left in chaos, but really we're only here for Alistair, and that's really it. Now, unfortunately, the sequel was a little bit annoying. I really freaking love, like, I cannot tell you how much I love Alistair and Gavin's point of view. I mean, they became serious favorites of mine by the end of All of Us Villains, and this book is told in different point of views, so you really get to jump back and forth with all the stories. But really, Alistair's was my absolute favorite, and in All of Our Demise, I freaking loved his chapters. I loved Gavin's chapters. I suspected that Gavin had a thing for Alistair disguised as hate because they were natural enemies, and I was right. And it was honestly exciting to see them come into that realization and kind of come together. However, the rest of the crew, it was just not a thing. It was just so not good. I did like that all these other characters really developed and changed so much. I mean, they really got to see who they actually were, because when you really read a certain character's perspective, you can only see them through their own eyes. So it's really hard to see maybe other parts of them or who they really are, because maybe they think they're doing the right thing and everyone else around them is like, no, you crazy. You're actually crazy. As a reader, you hear what they're actually saying and pointing at, and that's when you see this character as a bigger picture. But in this book, and you're in other people's point of view, you start to really put together every character because you're reading their point of view and other people's point of view. And I just really like seeing all the development with these characters, because a lot of them realized just how awful they actually are. And those are things that other people have tried to tell them, like, hey, you're not actually a good person. You're not doing the right things, and this is why. It was cool to see that, but they were also just really annoying and kind of terrible characters, and I did not care. I was like not invested in the rest of the characters, and that was not how I felt in the first book. I was really interested in hearing everyone's perspective, even though I fell in love with Alistair the most, and then Gavin's story. In this one, I was like, man, I don't care, just let's go back to Alistair. And so this book really felt like the only good plot line was Alistair's plot line. Everything else was a hot mess. It really wasn't moving like you would expect it to move, but that really, again, wasn't my problem. It was all of these other characters that just, it was boring. It didn't captivate me. They were so wishy-washy. You really lose your readers when you don't make them care for a character, but it's still half of the book or a majority of the book, because Alistair and Gavin are like 2 of 5, so you're not always gonna be in Gavin's point of view or in Alistair's point of view. And so, I mean, I still enjoyed it, and I was conflicted. I was like, how do I rate this? Because really, I only cared about Alistair and Gavin, but their story was gorgeous, and I really enjoyed their ending and just how it all wrapped up. But at the same time, you have these other characters who make a big portion of this book, and I just don't care. I was speeding through their chapters. I was like, let's get through this. And so I ended up giving it a 3.5. I still think Alistair and Gavin's story was really powerful and really beautiful. I really want to give credit to the book and to the author for writing such awesome characters and storylines and, you know, and perspectives. And at the same time, I want to be real and let you know that maybe it won't be as enjoyable as the first book as a whole. Now we're going to go to a really popular book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And some of you might be surprised by my rating of this book, but I'm gonna break down why. I picked up Addie LaRue because I read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, and The Last Tale of the Flower Bride said, if you like Addie LaRue, you will like this book. I liked Flower Bride, and I had never read Addie LaRue, so I kind of just went backwards. Addie LaRue is this character that just wants to be free. She's born, I believe, in the 1700s in France, and so she's expected to get married and have kids, drain out her life for her husband, and then just die. And she doesn't. She wants to live, she wants to explore, she wants to do all these things, but she doesn't know how to get out of her situation, and so she ends up making a deal with darkness itself. And so she tells darkness all the things that she doesn't want in her life, tells him that she just wants to be free. He grants her wish and says that when she's done with this life that he gave her, she can call upon him and surrender her soul, because that's what he's in it for, like reaping souls. What she didn't realize is that darkness did give her freedom, but all the conditions that came with it are really insane. Every time she meets someone, they immediately forget her. So if they walk out the door, turn around, or if there's a barrier between them right after them talking, it really is like she never existed. They've never met. They never talked to each other. And so that means she can never own a house because no one will remember giving this to her. There's a part in her curse where she can't even sign her name, so she can't have anything tangible to show that she signed off on something or a deal or anything like that. She also can't say her real name. There's just a lot of truth that she tries to speak and she can't say, like she can't tell anyone about her curse. And so you really find out all of her different conditions and limitations throughout the book. Everything changes when she is, I think it's like 2013 or something. She runs into this guy named Henry, and he's really unremarkable. Like there's nothing insane about him that would make him any different. And by now Addie has been in the world for 300 years. She's tried everything, you know, she knows her limits, and he actually remembers her. And when they meet again, he remembers her again. And so she's totally spooked, wondering what is going on, and that's really where the real story begins. So I really thought I would love this book because it's also historical fiction. It's super depressing. It has this really interesting premise of this character that wanted to live freely and is now stuck in this awful cycle. It also touches on depression and unaliving oneself and what it means to live in this world and how you make the most out of your life. But this book is broken down into 7 parts, and parts 2 through 6 were so freaking slow, but not in a good way. Like, I don't mind if it's a really full book. I mean, Keeper of the Lost Cities, Babel, all of these books were very long in pages. Keeper was nearly 800 pages. Babel was definitely over 500. Even though it paced a little slow, it was still really good. I just think that you get something out of it. You get this reward. But with Addie LaRue, I just felt like it went on and on and on about the same thing, but it didn't give me anything. It didn't add anything to the way I was feeling toward Addie. I never really felt like I learned who Addie is as a person, just the conditions and what she was suffering through. But I don't really know who Addie is. Like, I can't tell you she's this really nice person that loves this and this and does this and this. She was just trying to play the conditions of her curse. That's really all I know. And even to the end, that's all I really knew. So for a really long time, the rating was just going lower and lower and lower. What I freaking hated about this book is that the ending really moved me. So the ending really made me cry, which I didn't expect, because it's not like I'm super jiving and connecting with these characters, so why would I start crying with these characters? But alas, it made me cry. Those 3 little words at the end. And I have to say that I really enjoyed that ending, Henry's point of view in these things, way more than the full book itself. I'd rather read Henry's telling than Schwab's about Addie LaRue. I really think like I didn't fully enjoy this book probably because of the narrator. I just think the narrator was wrong for me. I maybe would have enjoyed that ending, which I don't want to reveal to you, being, you know, the beginning of the book, and then eventually we continue where Henry and Addie meet, and then finally getting to the full ending of this book. I feel like I would have enjoyed it more. I just didn't really like Addie as a character. I also have to note, she's been on this earth for 300 years, and she does talk about like World War I, World War II, seeing photography develop and film develop and airplanes and trains and cars and internet, but she only ever goes to Europe and the US. She's literally either in New York or France, a little bit of Germany, the UK, France again, a little bit of Italy. 300 years and you're not going to talk about South America, Central America, Asia. I've seen the world, France and the US, baby. Where are the rest of us? Where are the rest of your friends who are make up the rest of the population and are not just Eurocentric looking people? I will say in that regard too, it just sounded stupid. Okay, I get that France is like your place and stuff, but when she's talking about all these historical figures, because this is also a historical fiction book, which I freaking love, and the twist in these books just fell so flat to me. I was like, okay, what about everything else that happened in the world? Other than a couple philosophers from Russia, a painter from Italy, and like a bunch from France, and technology in the US and the 2 wars. What about the rest of humanity and the rest of history and all these other awesome, dope characters throughout history that you just don't even touch? Yeah. I don't think I would read this again, but that ending was beautiful. For this reason, I give Addie LaRue 2.5 stars. Also, shout out to Rachel's Reading Nook. I saw that she was going to read this in one of her videos and I commented that I would too, so she reached out and asked if we wanted to buddy read, and we both did, and through the encouragement of each other we were able to finish this book. Definitely check her channel out. She recommends so much literary fiction and especially books that focus on women. We're nearing toward the end of my bottom two, the Kiss Quotient. So I said I would start in February all of my romance challenge where I just read romance all month long, but this one was available right away in my library. It's very popular, and so I just wanted to read it, and I got it in January. This is the first book I tried, and I really kept an open mind because I haven't read like true romance before, like I've mentioned, but it was so hard for me to rate. And fortunately, since at the time I'm recording this it's February already, I wasted no time starting my romance books in February. I started one that you all will hear about, and I realized how much I'm enjoying that one, and that helped me realize how I actually feel about this one, because I was just worried like maybe it's just not my genre. I don't want to be unfair to a genre because maybe it's just not for me, so I don't know how to rate this. But really, I'm reading this other romance book. I'm super enjoying it. It's so good and I want to keep reading, and so now I realize, okay, it's not a genre thing, it's just this book. So Kiss Quotient, I should have read the premise so I would have seen what I was getting myself into, but it's this character that has Asperger's, and for some freaking reason her parents are telling her that she needs to get married and needs to get out there because she's in her 30s already, and she actually really listens to this and she really wants to make her parents happy. And so really it's not about her wanting a relationship or her wanting to get married. It's the fact that her parents are pressuring her, especially her mom, to finally have a boyfriend. And so she does think about someone at her work. She's a econometrist or something. I don't remember how you say it, but she's not an economist. She's a whole other thing that has to do with math or something. But yeah, so she's really wealthy. She comes from a wealthy family, and she also makes a lot of money in her job. So she can make anyone a really happy sugar baby. She thinks about this person at her work, Phil, that I automatically hate because the advice he gives her is that men really like women who know what to do in bed, and so if she really wants to keep a man, she has to learn how to please one. And unfortunately her sexual experiences have been very unpleasant, where she has now become pretty afraid of them. So while she consented to these things, these guys didn't really take care of her, so they weren't focused on her feeling good and safe and taking it slow. They were focused on their own pleasure. That's the only experience she has. And so she has this idea to hire an escort to teach her how to be good in bed, because that's what Phil told her. And I'm like, freaking Phil, why? Just why? But as a researcher and a scientist, she really wants to figure out the formula of like how to be this great partner. So Stella decides to hire an escort, and so in comes Michael, and Michael is supposed to be like this really handsome hot guy, and just Stella is just so entranced by him, but she's so shy. I had no idea that I would be reading very explicit things. It made driving in the car and listening to this via audiobook very interesting, because you had all of these words that I cannot say on YouTube really loud in these speakers that I did not expect to pop up, and I was just like, I did not expect it to go into details. I thought maybe it would be closed door once we got to the part there, but I mean, that's the point of the plot. Fortunately for us, the plot does change to where Stella actually wants to learn how to be more of a girlfriend than she does just a sexual partner. They end up making this deal, which Michael doesn't like seeing a client more than once because he's had really bad experiences in the past with clients falling in love with him. It just gets messy. He wants to keep things professional. But he is really entranced by Stella, and so he agrees, and he really feels something for her. But you know, of course it's a romance novel, so it takes them forever to admit that. And so that's really what the plot really is. They act like a couple, but they're not really a couple, but we can all see that they really are acting genuinely, so it's like they're a real couple. Now what was funny in the story is like I read all of these things and it went on and on about their adventures and what they were doing together and all this stuff, and I was like, wow, they're really falling for each other. And then the next line was like, so it's been 5 days, and I was like, what? Like, it's been 5 days and you made it sound like you guys have been together for at least 3 months or something like that. 5 days. And so I think that's why I rated it a little bit lower, because it was just like too perfect. Stella was apparently everything Michael ever dreamt of, but also completely different, because he thought he had a certain body type in mind and she did not fit that body type, but everything else was like in his fantasies and what he would look up, you know, to turn himself on or whatever. And at the same time, Stella just found this perfect partner right away and also fell in love with him. Literally by the end of the book, they are married. It's like 2 months out after they started dating and like got over all this miscommunication. So I don't know, I feel like that's where I just didn't really enjoy it. I wasn't rushing or pressuring myself or really thinking about this book constantly, where like I had to know what was going on with Michael and Stella. Whatever, this is working out a little too perfectly for them. Like, I don't really care to keep reading this type of story and like find out what's going on with them. So I really pushed myself to finish this book, but I didn't necessarily like super enjoy it or anything like that. I will say that I really liked the consent in this book. I really like that Michael really was taking his time and aware of making sure Stella felt comfortable. I really like the way Stella was using her voice and advocating for herself. You don't really see a lot of scenes in Hollywood and stuff where they are also use protection and, like I said, consent, and you actually get that in this book. At least we've come a very long way from, you know, thinking pressuring someone equals romance, and now we have more consent and awareness. And still, with all of that in mind, I will give this 2 stars because, like I said, I wasn't in a rush to know what was going on. I really had to force myself to finish reading this, but it had its cute moments. Now for my final and I guess worst read of last month, I finally tried A Court of Thorns and Roses. I have a lot to say about this book, okay? And shout out to everyone, people who are huge fans and people who are not huge fans, but also not haters, because I'm not hating on these series, just FYI, for talking about this with me on Instagram as I posted about it, and I was bold enough to be honest about it in my stories, because a lot of you agreed with me that the first book is not the best book, but there's still people obsessed out there with it. So A Court of Thorns and Roses is like a super popular fantasy book. I honestly can't see why right away. To be quite honest with you, I feel like it's just because the characters, like the guy characters in these books, the Fae, are just really hot. And I think that excused a lot of things in this book. And so in A Court of Thorns and Roses, it basically started as a Beauty and the Beast retelling, where the main character, Feyre, is taking care of her family who fell into poverty. And so just like Beauty and the Beast, she's kind of like paying off these debts. And so she's a hunter, and she accidentally ends up killing one of the Fae. And the Fae are like these really powerful, you know, paranormal, supernatural, whatever beings. So I guess this is also considered pararomance. When word gets out that she killed these things, it comes after her and her family. So she has these 2 sisters that are super freaking rude. They are starving, and her sisters literally take her hard-earned money and just go off and buy shoes and stuff because they're used to the bougie life. Doesn't even make sense, because if you're starving, why would shoes be on your... Okay, whatever. We'll get to that probably in a book rant. This High Lord comes in and he's like, "Who killed the Fae?" Farrah's like, "Me, Hobag. What you gonna do about it?" And so this guy, Tamlin, he's like, "Well, as punishment, you have to come live on our side of the wall." And Feyre is stuck in this other side of the world, and her family is like freaked out, but at the same time, they're like, "Well, you gotta go, because if you don't, we're gonna get killed, you're gonna get killed." And I mean, there's really no winning there, right? But once she gets there, like, you would think she's a slave forever, because that's what she thought. And we're told that Fae hate humans and used to enslave them, but instead she's whisked away into this beautiful, like, gorgeous land with this really rich High Lord. So he's not even like a regular Fae, he's a rich hot daddy Fae. And so she's like, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" And he keeps telling her, "I mean, you're free, like, you're free to do whatever." But like any normal person, she would be like, "Why would you kidnap me and like take me here? And you guys are known to like hate humanity, so why would I trust that I'm just free to live my life rent free here?" her. It takes her a while, but really that it really is all Tamlin for some reason is so interested in her and wants her to just paint all day and like have really good food. And she does go through all this survivor's guilt and guilt that her family's starving. Tamlin, again being this perfect monster, actually set up her family with the perfect situation where they have all this wealth and they just think that she's away tending to her really sick aunt and everything. And so it's just weird because right from the beginning, everything's just working perfectly out for Feyre. She has this new hot sugar daddy and she doesn't have to live in poverty anymore, and neither does her family. So she really doesn't have to feel bad or feel like she abandoned them. I mean, I do appreciate that she's working through all those emotions, but you know, it's just, it took forever for her to get there. Now, the truth of this book is like there's actually this curse, and it's kind of ridiculous because Tamlin and the rest of his fairy court, they're all wearing these masks, and she doesn't really find out why until the very end, and it turns out to be a part of their curse because this really evil woman, Amarantha, let me just say that's a badass name though. Amarantha is this really human-hating, bloodlusting she-devil who for some reason is super freaking in love with Tamlin. So again, like everyone loves Tamlin, and he refused her, and so she got pissed and cursed him and was like so specific in her curse and was like, until you make a human who hates us with her whole heart and kills an innocent fairy fall in love with you, then and only then will your curse be lifted. But also, let me add this mask on you because we don't want humans falling in love with you just because you're hot. Basically, this plan fails. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. Like, it fails. Feyre does not fall in love with Tamlin, and Tamlin last minute gives up trying to make her fall in love with him. I mean, they do fall in love with each other, but she doesn't outright say it, and so the curse isn't broken. And so later on, when she has to go back for Tamlin, she has to go through all these trials. And I kid you not, I was just laughing the whole time during these trials because I just had the craziest images. Again, look out for that book rant because I'm really gonna break down this book for you guys because I just could not with some of these lines and images, and apparently a lot of you couldn't either, but whatever, we're still out here. Because the MC was just so undefined, I felt like, okay, is Feyre this badass woman who takes care of her family and hunts and is smart and really helps her entire family survive, or is she this dumb Feyre that we see later on in the trials? I don't know which one she is, and I also don't know why we're suddenly rooting for Tamlin and Feyre to get together when they really never fully developed a relationship. It was just like overnight after one time they went skinny dipping. I just don't understand the love hype around this, but I was promised that the second book would be better, and so I'm gonna try the second book because I'm gonna keep going. I guess we'll see. I did love the world building. People do complain that it's very slow and there's just a lot of details and world building, but I actually really love that. That's the only reason this book did not get 1 star, but all of the other reasons is the reason it's getting 2 stars. It just made me laugh. I could not take it seriously. I was not hardcore shipping them, but I like the world. And as we finally finish up in here, you made it, mi gente. So many of you, I've noticed, keep coming back and watching more, but are not yet subscribed yet, so please subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I hope you all enjoyed this new segment. Let me know if you liked it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!